Okay, we're going to be doing the Sirena S10 teardown. This will show you how you can fix pretty much any component of the Sirena S10. It's the exact same thing for all of our models at the moment. To access any of the inside, you are going to have to remove the rating label that you would find on the back. Once you do that, you can access the two screws on the rear. You will also have to remove the two top screws. So we've already removed the back HEPA cover, which would have been there, and the top screws on the back. Once these four screws are done, you can remove the whole back plate. It's faster to remove if you do disengage it from the dolly, so we're going to do that first. Okay. Then you can remove the back plate. It's really that simple. Inside you will find a PCB. This is the main computer board. It can now be changed at this point if you need to change out the computer board, and you should make note of all the connections that are here as well. Disconnect everything from the PCB. There's also two retaining screws on the PCB holding the board in place. Typically they're on the top left and bottom right. Remove those two screws. Once you do, you can now remove the main computer board, or what we call the main PCB. To access any of the other parts of the S10, you will have to separate the two body components. To do that, you'll have to remove it from the basin first. We suggest that you leave the noise reduction cover on the front. This will allow the two pieces to stay intact together while you remove the screws. Flip the unit upside down, and you'll find the 8 retaining screws down below, and these hold the two pieces together. So remove all 8 of these screws. Once you do, the two pieces will be able to separate. Remove the noise reduction cover, and we can now separate the two pieces of the Sirena. You will find that the switches are fed through an opening in the back, so when you do go to separate the pieces, you will have to feed this wiring back through. And now we access the main motor housing for the Sirena. On this side, this is our micro switch, which is used for the basin. If it's not functioning properly, then the unit will not turn on when it is engaged with the basin. Very simple to replace this part. There's one screw holding the retainer in place. Simply remove the one screw, and you can now lift out the retainer. The retainer houses the micro switch, and they're designed to go together in that fashion. On the front, we have the power nozzle socket. If you ever need to change the socket, you will have to remove this little flap door in the front. Unclip the wiring from the housing. Remove the flap door by squeezing the two sides together and pulling it out. Note there is a spring here. It's designed to help the door close. There's a retaining bracket that is holding our socket in place. That will have to be removed as well. You cannot effectively replace this socket without removing the whole intake. There are two retaining screws on the intake, one on either side. Remove those. And now we can lift the intake socket out of place. And it's much quicker and much more efficient to replace the socket this way. Please note the way the socket is slid in. It's very important for making sure that it remains stable. Now, should you need to get to the main motor housing for any reason, the fastest and easiest way is to remove the upper screws that are holding the top cover of the motor in place. Once the retaining screws are removed, the whole upper lid will lift out. Again, we have our wiring passing through the upper housing. Simply push them back through. This will allow us access to the top of the motor. So if you're wishing to change the carbon brushes, you will have to go through this entire process. The brushes are on either side of the motor. In order to change them, you need to remove the connection first. And then you will need to pry out the existing carbon brushes. Gently lift the tab. You don't want these to break inside, and they should pop out just like that. You can now replace just the carbon brushes on their own to extend the motor life. Should you wish to replace the motor, you will have to go through the further teardown process by removing the lower screws from the lower housing. This will allow us to remove the entire motor. To remove the bottom housing, pull off the top gasket. And you can now remove it. You can now simply replace the motor in its entirety if you would like. Gasket back on top. We'll go through the process of reassembling it shortly. Next, we're going to show you how to replace the switch PCB should it be required. There's two components of the S10 which will occasionally need to be replaced. Number one is the switch plate, switch housing, and number two is the face plate at the front. Occasionally the bottom lip will break. When this lip breaks, this piece does have to be replaced. In order to replace it, you will have to tear down the unit by removing the top. Flip over the unit. You can see the tabs down below. They can normally be disengaged with your fingers. If for some reason you can't, you can feel free to use a screwdriver. Please be careful when prying them. It's your front housing plate. Next, we're going to disengage the switch plate. You can see the switch PCB inside. The only way to access that switch PCB is to actually remove the whole switch plate. Again, you can normally disengage them with your fingers. Flip it over and simply remove the piece. This wire is actually held in place by tape inside. So you can remove the tape inside and then remove the switch. This switch can be independently tested. Both the on-off switch and the micro switch can be independently tested without tearing down the unit. Please see the troubleshooting guide for how to test those two components first. Should the switch PCB need to be replaced, please note the direction that it goes in. The cut on the top right of the board will go on the top right inside. Make sure that the wires are guided through the little slotted opening so that you can get them out. You will also have to replace the switch plate if you're replacing this switch, as you cannot peel the sticker off and reuse it. To access things like the filters, you will have to physically remove these pieces as well, so you can break down the entire S10 into its components. There are again 6 retaining screws inside here. It's very rare that you have to change any of these components. However, the sponge filters should occasionally be cleaned and or replaced. This becomes a dealer activity. So it's a great service job for you as a dealer should you need to go in and replace those filters. So once we've remove those 6 screws, we can now disassemble some of the other interior components if we need to. There are tabs holding some of these pieces in place as well, so please take a moment to check inside for the tabs. Each side piece is independent, as well as each filter. Okay, we have the 2 Sirena sides, left and right. This will expose our filters on the side for us. These can be replaced or cleaned at your discretion. The middle section is entirely on its own. Oops. As is the top housing. The handle is actually a 3-piece handle. In order to replace the entire handle, you will have to remove the 2 screws that you see down below here. And there's our handle pieces. They will separate by separating the tabs here as well. The logo is also a piece that's independently sold. The top motor housing. And now you have the complete teardown of the Sirena S10. Okay, pause the video.